soon. But we're going to talk about serial killers today. Grace, thanks for stopping by.
Yes, thank you for having me here again. I'm excited.
Absolutely, I'm excited to talk with you, and it's very interesting to talk about why we're talking serial killers because again, you're a murder mystery and your psychology background. Let's first of all define what is considered a serial killer. I think you know this from your psychology days.
Yes, so a serial killer is a person who has committed, I believe it's at least three different murders during different time periods. So there's a difference between serial killers and spree killers. Spree killers will kill a larger amount or multiple people in a matter of hours or maybe some days. A serial killer will have one victim and then maybe in a couple of weeks or in a couple of months, depending on the serial killer, you'll have another victim. Once it hits a certain number, like I said, I think it's three, but it could be more or less. But once you hit a certain number, that is what defines a serial killer.
Wow. Okay. That's quite interesting, which I did not know. And so you can't just have a spree of three in one time and then you're considered a serial killer. It has to be more than one time to be in the serial killer range, right?
Yes, and typically there is a distinct pattern to serial killers. Most of the time, they will choose the same method of killing. They will go after the same type of victim. They have a very normally, whenever they have a motive, it is typically drawn to some internal carnal urge, usually stemming from antisocial personality disorder or some paraphilias that go along comorbid with that disorder as a whole.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Uh, so basically the reason is because they have something that they want to accomplish by that next murder, it sounds like.
And you could say that it is very much a self gratifying thing in a lot of cases. These serial killers, they are in it for self gratification. It eventually, oftentimes, whenever I've listened to podcasts or watched documentaries explaining serial killers, oftentimes these serial killers, they start and it's like they cannot stop. It's an addiction for them. It's very much like if somebody is on drugs. So if somebody has a dose of heroin, they're going to want to go back. They're forever chasing that high. It's the same thing with serial killers. It is that practice of self gratification or seeking that high to some extent.
Seeking the high. Interesting. You talk about this. Is that why they have a lot of them have trophies?
Probably see that. Now, as far as trophies are concerned, I'm not entirely sure, but yes, part of it is that they do get an enjoyment out of the forbidden nature of it. Some of them, it is very much a carnal urge. It's very much along that route of this is very dangerous. I could get caught in some cases, and then it eventually devolves to they ultimately think that they cannot help themselves eventually in a lot of cases.
Really? I mean, and they think the world is out of control, it sounds like.
Yes, to some extent they think that they're out of control. Oftentimes you will see some of them will claim that they are agents of some evil force or that they have sold themselves to the devil or something, and they do this so that they have a quote unquote excuse to go out and do the things that they do. It's a very sick sort of reasoning so that they can go out and commit these murders a lot of times. You'll see that quite a lot in some serial killers.
Wow. I mean, I wouldn't have thought that some of this stuff, this is pretty interesting stuff. Did you learn this in school?
Partially. Most of it though came from listening to podcasts on the topic, reading a few books. My father is a huge history buff. He's also into true crime to some extent. He would listen to tons of true crime podcasts going back and forth, taking me to college and back. And because of the psychological nature of it, I started to get into true crime and I started to research things, especially personality disorders and other disorders that tend to be tied to serial killers. One of the most prominent that you see is antisocial personality disorder, or ASPD, which some people refer to as psychopathy or sociopathy. Those are particular strains of it.
Okay. So a lot of serial killers you're going to see not be very social.
Well, when I say antisocial personality disorder, it's not really about being social. It's actually more about the lack of a conscience. People with antisocial personality disorder do not feel empathy in the same way that normally a person would express empathy. There is no conscience there. So they might not necessarily see what they're doing as wrong, or they typically just do not care. Normally, if somebody has antisocial personality disorder, it's more about them getting in trouble versus them caring about what they're necessarily doing to other people. It is very much marked by callousness, in some cases, aggression, all sorts of lack of empathy. These all drive a person with antisocial personality disorder. Now, the thing is, not every person with that disorder will become a serial killer, but the rate of the serial killers that have these disorders is actually very high.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty wild to say the least.
Yeah.
I mean, and so how do we kind of identify someone who could be a potential serial killer?
Now, for that, there is, technically speaking, you're not supposed to diagnose outside of a clinical setting if you're not a professional, but there are definitely signs of concern. So, one sign, especially in childhood, you want to watch out for is cruelty to animals.
Hmm.
A person who lacks a conscience, typically they will be cruel to animals. They will harm, it might be small animals like frogs or cats, some even dogs. It really does depend, but typically you'll see cruelty to animals. For serial killers, you'll also see setting things on fire as a big one, and bedwetting, it turns out. That also tends to be an indicator. And typically, it's you have to have that particular cluster in order for that to be a concern. The thing is, though, children cannot be diagnosed with ASPD, only adults can. So it's more of looking at the warning signs. I believe that there is one conductive disorder that children can be diagnosed with that is associated with kind of the trend of them being diagnosed with ASPD later on, but I would need to do more research into that to clarify.
Well, I find this very fascinating. So, what serial killers have you been interested in, studied, or looked at uh, that intrigue you?
I have looked at several. I've looked at John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer, which these are the big common ones that people think of. You have Dean Corll. He was a notorious serial killer in Texas, I believe, if I remember correctly. You have the Russian, I think it's the Vampire of Dusseldorf. You have the chessboard killer, who he would mark his victims on the back of his chessboard, if I remember correctly. And he wanted to fill the whole entire chessboard. But
Wow.
one of the most interesting to me has been the aspect of the cult leader. Charles Manson is a huge example of this.
But he's not a serial killer, is Charles Manson?
He's not. Technically, he's not, but he was convicted of murder because he was compelling people to go out and commit these murders for him. So you will see that a lot of times with cult leaders where they're not necessarily, if they are involved in killing, they won't necessarily do it themselves, but they will definitely have others do it for them. And you will still see the same callousness and lack of empathy inside of them. It's just that they aren't doing the quote unquote dirty work.
And that's what you see sometimes, I guess, with mafias or different big organizations where they'll just have so many people killed. Are they considered serial killers, the ones that run big mob rings and stuff like that and killed many people calculatedly?
I'm not entirely sure. I wouldn't necessarily classify them as your typical serial killers. When I think of serial killers, I'm typically thinking of one person who is constantly killing people in the same way for their own self gratification. There normally there's not even any sort of monetary drive when it comes to our typical serial killers. Though I could see how someone could make the point that people in the mafia who have killed multiple people could be considered serial killers. Absolutely. I have no doubt that serial killers could certainly work in the mafia or in those organizations.
What about hired hitmen? Would you define them serial killers?
Yes, actually, I would. A lot of times with hired hitmen, you do tend to see a lack of empathy. A notorious example of this would be the Iceman. Now, he claims to have murdered hundreds of people. We can't say for sure because serial killers will often lie. They might say that they did more because they're trying to brag about it, or they might say that they did less, or they might not remember. But yes, you definitely see hitmen because of their typical lack of empathy associated with that occupation. I hesitate to call that an occupation, but with that particular occupation, you would have to have a certain level of a lack of empathy, a callousness, a lack of a conscience.
As a psychology major, how do you use kind of some of the serial killing in your writing?
Yes, so for me, it's all about getting into the killer's mind. It's about seeing what could have possibly caused them to do this, or what do they think like? What are their ideals? Now, in my story, my serial killers that our protagonist is up against are more so in the cult category, but what you tend to see throughout every single serial killer and even throughout cults, cult leaders, you'll see particular ideologies where they might try to justify something, or they will look at the world a certain way and they have built this up in their minds so that to them it is okay to go out and do these things. Obviously, some do not do this, but in many cases, you will see this particular form of, oh, well, I'm some agent of evil, or I'm doing this. In the case of a cult, I'm doing this for the greater good, things like that.
I get it. Interesting. And you really like to look underneath everyone when you're writing your books, especially your murder mysteries, to look at kind of psychological profiles of each one of them, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Every single character is going to have a motivation for what they do. There are reasons behind why they do the things that they do. They could be personal, they could be for somebody else, but that's what you will typically see, especially whenever you're trying to write characters and keeping them realistic.
Right. Soon. We'll be talking very soon. The website will be up, but you can follow her right now at Grace Jenkins Author on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. More to come for sure. Soon, Grace Jenkins Author on Facebook. Stay tuned, and we appreciate it, Grace, for you coming by.
Thank you.
All right. You're listening and watching.